I never looked at Genesis creation account in so many different ways, and then the Genesis chapter 6 flood, which accounts for what we see today in terms of the worldwide flood and the implications thereafter in such detail. Some of these vocabulary things are just over the top for me, but I'm reading it a couple more times, and I transcribed a lot of these videos and publications to present the case for what I understand without going into thousands more pages. And this is a 500-page study I've done on creation versus evolution, and now it's just scratching the surface. Implications of a cooling ocean. Now, what are we looking at? Well, I titled these numbers of YouTube's the geologic table, which is the table that evolutionists present. But I'm saying the geologic reality. I have to be economizing on my words, otherwise the title would be too long. The geologic reality is by worldwide flood, causative by the worldwide flood, and in this case, the rapid spread of man, animals, and plants. We're looking at the implications of a cooling ocean in this scenario. If the model of seafloor sediment accumulation described above is correct, we have this paragraph above in the last. The shape of the cooling curves similar to that expected by a body starting at high temperature and cooling by heat transfer to a cooler reservoir. So the implications of this cooling ocean, a rapidly cooling ocean. If the model of the seafloor sediments underneath that ocean accumulation described above is correct, the implications are dramatic. Most of the sediments found on the seafloor were deposited rapidly. As we look through the various things that we're looking at to find out, well, how did the Earth get the way it was today that we can see on the surface, the seas, and the continents, and the rivers, and the oceans, and so on. So most of the sediments found on the seafloor were deposited rapidly just a few thousand years ago. The rate of accumulation would have been very rapid during and immediately following the flood. We're assuming, since we have looked at this and concluded over and over and over and over and over again, the only thing that is a reasonable, plausible explanation is a worldwide catastrophic event of water coming down from above in that frozen sky, so super frozen that it actually shades or filters out the ultraviolet radiation, creates huge increases in oxygen. People grow, animals grow, things grow tremendously larger. And that's why we see the fossil record, according to the evolutionists, we see much larger species in the past. We're getting smaller and smaller and fewer. Things are devolving, not evolving. So the rate of accumulation would have been very rapid during immediately following the flood. Not only erosion of sands and muds from the continents would have been involved, but also the accumulation of microscopic plant and animal organisms from the ocean itself. Gets deposited, and then gets turmoil occurs. This would indicate that the tiny organisms in the ocean probably bloomed following the flood due to what? All the nutrients added by the flood and the greater warmth. These things got buried, but they're still alive, and they're giving them the nutrients and the warmer oceans, as well as fewer, larger predators, allowing a continued rapid doubling of biomass at a microscopic and smaller level right there in that particular instance. The warm ocean would have produced at least 4 significant atmospheric effects. Much larger evaporation of water. Where am I? Large temperature contrast between oceans would have produced strong winds and heavy precipitation parallel to coastlines. The blooming of ocean life followed the flood would likely have absorbed large quantities of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, causing radiational cooling. Warm oceans and radiational cooling aloft would create more convection in the atmosphere, leading to more precipitation. Things happening rapidly. After the flood, the aftermath. We had Ice Age, and then the Ice Age leads into these things. The atmospheric effects appear to be an adequate explanation for the Ice Age, which produced more extensive glaciers than today, and massive sheets of ice over large areas of the polar regions and mid-latitudes. The Ice Age in the biblical time frame probably lasted from shortly after the flood to about the time of Abraham, a couple of thousand years. You know what? How do you know? A couple of thousand years. Just add the genealogies in Genesis chapter 1 all the way up to Abraham. And here, remarkably, add up to 2,000 years. Now, we don't know the months, days, weeks, and so on. How many months in a year? 12. It could be 1,294 plus 6 months and so on and so forth, but just about 2,000 years. So, the Ice Age probably affected the peoples of the Bible with a cooler, wetter climate and more grasslands in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, Palestine, and North Africa. These regions are known for their desert climate today, but evidence points to more vegetation in the past. Just look at the frozen tundra on the polar caps. Where'd the frozen tundra come from? And we have animal parts and plant parts and soil. Once the oceans cooled to the equilibrium temperature of today, the climate reached a stable condition with only relatively minor variations. Generally, the world's climate would be expected to be drier as less moisture was transported into the atmosphere from a cooler ocean. Winds along continental boundaries weakened. Less carbon dioxide was removed from the atmosphere, leading to warming atmospheric temperatures, right? Global warming, and convection decreased. Variations in climate would be primarily produced by seasonal changes rather than highly energetic storms, and cooling of the ocean. Conclusions and recommendations. Rapid accumulation of seafloor sediments during the following the flood implied that the ocean cooled rapidly over the past few thousand years, up to Abraham. This rapid cooling explains the cause of the Ice Age and other climate changes. Rather than being a puzzle for young Earth creationists, thick layers of sediment on the seafloor and massive sheets of ice on the continents appear to be a consequence of the catastrophic events of the Genesis flood. Once again, biblical accounts of Earth history are being confirmed, lending credibility to God's Word. What did I do? This is wonderful. I don't have to be an expert geologist or a scientist to get this, because these scientists have brought this down in words and reports and videos to my level and can explain it. Now, some of these words I have to look up in the dictionary, and hopefully you will do your own research and be enthusiastic as I am that the worldwide flood explains the way the Earth is today. It is recommended that the young Earth model of seafloor sediment accumulation proposed here be improved by analyzing the oxygen and carbon isotopes from many additional cores. So if you're a scientist, get out there and start measuring. The identification of the flood post-period boundary needs to have high priority. An analysis of the productivity of sediments containing shells of living organisms, not living, in the post-flood ocean should be made and compared with the massive sediments observed. The accumulation of hundreds of feet of sediment on the average and miles of sediment in some locations, such as the Arctic Ocean. Sediments, Arctic Ocean, where did that come from? Worldwide flood, require very high productivity following the flood. Excuse me. Although the potential for high productivity has been suggested by some, can the ocean supply enough nutrients in some 4,500 years to explain observed sediments? Good question. Let's see. Then we got footnotes in this article. Institute for Creation Research. For Creation Research. They have a bunch of scientists on here. Also, besides this institute, which they were in El Cajon for a while there, and I visited their museum. And also, answers in Genesis.org. They have articles like that too. And between those two, they give you a layman's point of view of these many things. So, the richness of the Siberian mammoth deposits in the permafrost defies description. although uniformitarian writers consistently understate the extent and abundance of these beds, even their admissions are significant. Listen to this. In this connection, the extinction of the woolly mammoth in northern Eurasia should be mentioned. In Siberia alone, some 50,000 mammoth tusks have been collected and sold to the ivory trade. And there are rare occurrences of whole animals preserved in frozen ground. And these aren't fossils, these are frozen elephant tusks, and actually hair and meat that the natives there dig up, thaw out, and eat. Or not the hair, but these finds have fostered many tales of great catastrophes for which there is no factual support. Really? So how did they all happen? Yeah, you're guessing that, these things were 100 million billion years old, and then you don't provide an explanation on your end. The only thing that says that these things are frozen, those woolly mammoths didn't get frozen over millions of years or 10 years. It was frozen pretty quickly. How long does it take an elephant to be frozen? 100 million years? Really? Not too scientific. Perhaps a little less restrained estimation of the character of these deposits may be gleaned from the following. A certain amount of ivory is furnished by the vast stores of remains of prehistoric animals still existing throughout Russia, principally in Siberia in the neighborhood of the Lena and other rivers discharging into the Arctic Ocean. The mammoth and mastodon seem at one time to have been common over the whole surface of the globe. In England, so they're up there in Siberia. Oh, it was always frozen? Really? What did they eat? Ice? In England, tusks have been dug up, for instance, at Dungeness, as long as 12 feet and weighing 200 pounds. The Siberian deposits have been worked now for nearly 2 centuries. The store appears to be as inexhaustible as a coal field. Some think that a day may come when the spread of civilization may cause the utter disappearance of the elephant in Africa, and that it will be to these deposits that we may have to turn as the only source of animal ivory. This article in Encyclopedia Britannica. See, how far do you have to go? Just go to the encyclopedia and then use your own common sense. How did these mastodons and mammoths get there? Oh, billions of years ago, millions of years ago, they lived there and they got gradually frozen. And the Arctic islands north of Siberia have been described as even more densely packed with the remains of elephants and other mammals, as well as dense tangles of fossil trees and other plants, and so much that the entire islands seem to be composed of organic debris. And all kinds of mixing and matching of stuff that violates the evolutionist geological strata idea, the geologic table. No wonder these things have fostered tales of great catastrophes, because they would. The wonder is that the uniformitarians could possibly offer any other explanation in any seriousness, but they do. There is most certainly no modern parallel entombment of elephants or any other kind of mammal taking place anywhere in the modern world. It may not be quite as clear as yet whether these deposits were made directly during the deluge period or soon after, or both. But it seems fairly evident that the extermination of such immense hordes of animals and their interment in what has ever since been frozen soil must somehow be explained in terms of the events accompanying just such a universal aqueous catastrophe as the Bible describes. I say worldwide flood. He wants the universal aqueous catastrophe. He likes to use three-syllable words. It has occasionally been suggested that the ocean waters would have remained warm. All right, what a great phone call. Robin, fellow Christian. When you lift up another Christian, you get bonus points in heaven. Well, in any case, it has already occasionally been suggested that the ocean waters would have remained warm for too long a period to allow for the preservation of the soft parts of the animals, the inference being that they must have perished in some other catastrophe centuries later. However, it is doubtful that post-diluvian Siberian climates could ever have supported such vast hordes of animals.